Recording in progress.
Welcome, everyone. We're here in the chamber for a regularly scheduled meeting of the Land Use Committee. I'm Andrea Kelly. I'm the chair. With us on the committee, we have Councillor Allison Leary from Ward 1, Tariq Lucas from Ward 2, I'm from Ward 3, Randy Block from Ward 4, Andrea Downs is on Zoom and she is from Ward 5, Alan Lobovitz from Ward 6, Mark Laredo, Ward 7, and Stephen Farrell, Ward 8. We're a full house of Land Use Committee members. We've got two items tonight before us. The first is number 11, oh, sorry, no, that was the address, number 207-24, which is a request for a special permit to waive 5 parking stalls at 1173 to 1177 Walnut Street. And we will hear first from the Planning Department.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to share my screen with a presentation. And I'm also covering for Joe, and he is on vacation, but let's see. Okay, so like I said, this is Katie Wewell from the Chief Planner for Current Planning. This is the petition for 207-24 for 1173-1177 Walnut Street. The relief needed is a parking waiver of 15 stalls due to the introduction of an office use into a 3,650 square foot basement space. When reviewing the request, the council should consider the 4 standard special permit criteria as well as the 5th parking criteria, which applies to waivers from section 5.13 of the zoning ordinance. The site is located on Walnut Street in the Newton Highlands Village Center in the Business 1 zoning district and also within the Village Center 3 overlay. The area consists of a mix of zones and uses, including restaurants, bank, retail, multifamily, and single-family homes, as well as a municipal parking lot. The site is also just across the street from the Newton Highlands T station, as well as the 59 bus stop, which runs from Needham Junction to Watertown Square. The site was developed approximately 1950 and has a downward slope from the Walnut Street frontage to the rear property line opposite Walnut Street. The site is largely hardscape and no changes are proposed to the exterior of the building or parking. There are approximately 15 parking stalls on site with associated paved areas in the back of the building. So you can see that sort of along the property line opposite Walnut Street, and then the parking over here closest to Floral. The office use requires 1 parking stall per every 250 square feet. So where they are seeking to occupy the 3,650 square foot basement space, this results in a parking requirement of 15 stalls for that specific use. The 15 parking stalls on site are allotted to the 2 existing personal service uses on the upper level to satisfy their parking requirement per the zoning. So that leaves none available for the office use to sort of credit towards their parking requirement in the zoning. And that's from section 5.1.4 in the ordinance. So you can see here that the slope I was talking about and how you can see that basement space as the site slopes down. And then this is the first floor where it's more of a tan color. And planning is largely supportive of the parking waiver for the reasons outlined in the planning memo. The location is within a village center with access to transit, so this makes it an appropriate location for the waiver. The office use as well as the personal services uses on the first floor have different peak times of operation. So this lot is unlikely to be used at the same time with either uses, employees, or visitors. And there is also ample public parking available in the Hartford Street Law, as well as on-street parking all along in the Newton Highlands Village Center vicinity. So that concludes the planning presentation, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Wewell. Is there anybody here in the chamber or online from the proponent, from the petitioner, who would like to speak to this? Hunter, you're in the process of being promoted.
Hello, good evening. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes, we are. Let us know who you are, please.
Yes, hello, my name is Hunter Guarino, and I am speaking on behalf of the petitioner in a way I believe listed on the meeting agenda. The petitioner is Hamey Inc. That is the landlord and the owner of the building. I am actually the CFO of the tenant. That is, we are the business that is interested and would like to both have the parking waiver and utilize the basement space for our studio and office.
And do you want to add something to the petition, to what was presented as the petition by the planning department? Any other comments or details you'd like to let us know about?
I thank you so much, Katie. That was a really excellent recap, and I think she covered most of the key points. I would also add that our lease does allocate 3 stalls for our usage, and that we have been making use of those. And we have a fairly small team, 3 members in the Boston area, and we only anticipate growing to 1 or 2 more members in the coming months. So the existing parking available is sufficient for our needs. And it will be planned as a working space for our team, and not intended as a place where we'll be inviting many members of the public in.
Oh, thank you. That's very helpful. I hope you'll stay on in case there are any questions for you from
Yes,
the committee or the public. Before we take this into committee, I also want to welcome and identify city staff members who are with us tonight. Here in the chamber, we have our clerk, Scott Matthews. Online, we have Kat Kemet from planning. We have Jonah Temple from the law department. We have Katie Wewell, who we heard from, and also Shaylin Davies Ayanako, who's our housing program manager, is going to be part of the meeting, most likely for the next item, but welcome and thank you, staff members, for being here. We will now see if any members of the public have comments or questions about this petition. If you're online, the City Council is now still in a trial period using a webinar format, because we had problems with Zoom bombing. So if you are online and like to raise your hand, you have a virtual hand at the bottom of your screen, and the clerk will promote you to a panelist. You'll have to accept that. We'll give it a minute just to see if anybody's interested in speaking. And if not, we'll take it into committee. Oh. Victor, we're just going to wait a moment and see if you did have your hand up. Victor, go ahead and identify yourself and speak.
Hi, I'm Victor. I'm the CEO. I work with Hunter. I think Hunter sort of recapped everything that I had to say, but I'm one of the 3 people that will be working in the space.
Victor, what's your last name?
Hung, H-U-N-G.
Thank you. Glad to have you. Any other members of the public? And if not, we will take it into committee. I saw that Councillor Block had his hand up, and then we'll have Laredo, and then Lobovitz, and then Leary.
Thank you, Chair Kelly. I was curious about the parking spaces, which seem to be allocated among the 3 tenants. 6 spaces for the dog groomer, 6 spaces for the nail salon, and 3 for, I guess, the tenant in the basement. And I was a little surprised to see that because I just thought that the 15 units were being shared by the current 2 tenants on the ground floor. Can anyone shed any light on this? Have 3 units been allocated for some time to the basement tenants, depending on who they are?
Ms. Wewell, would you like to take the first stab at that, or we can also ask Hunter and Victor if they have anything to add?
Yeah, I think if I'm kind of following the train of thought correctly, I think maybe the answer is that there's 2 different sort of calculations here. It's what they actually have in their lease agreement, but then what is required per the zoning. So those, if you think about it this way, the stalls on site are unavailable per the zoning. They've already been credited to the other uses on site. So then that leaves this use with sort of a gap, based on their square footage of 15 stalls. So I think there's sort of 2 things going on here. It's what's being leased, but then what's required per the zoning. Does that help, Councilor Block?
I guess that explains the sort of the difference between the signage and the parking area and our parking requirements. But yes, okay, thanks very much.
Is that it for you for now?
That's it for now.
We're next going to go to Councilor Laredo, but I'd like to welcome Councilors Gentile and Wright, who have joined us online.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This project, I think, seems just fine to me. I just want to make sure I'm fully understanding everything. So the proposed office space is going into the basement of the existing building, which is currently being used for storage. Is that right?
Correct. And it's our understanding from what we've been told that we are the first tenants to actually be moving into the space. So we're just trying to do things correctly. Yes,
Sure.
we are moving into
So we're not changing the building footprint at all or anything like that. We're just trying to accommodate your business, put it in there, and to either you or I guess your question to you, is there any shared, is the parking specified for each particular business so that a patron from one business cannot use another business's slot, or is it really left open and first come, first serve?
Thank you for that. The way we kind of identified, which spaces are allocated to us under the lease is there was previously an attempt for another tenant to be in the basement space. They never received approval, I believe, or just decided not to occupy the space eventually. But they had put up 3 parking signs for their business. And so those spots were not labeled as being allocated to the 2 other tenants in the building. And so that's how we identified which spots, the landlord intended to be our 3 spaces. And I have not actually been on site frequently. So maybe Victor can speak more to how he has seen some of the other spaces being used across the other 2 businesses, but that's how we've identified where our team members are able to park.
I appreciate that. I'll just add, we don't want to get at all into the business of micromanaging how a landlord divides up parking spaces among various tenants or innumerable configurations that might be acceptable depending on the circumstances. So I'm all set, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Laredo. Councilor Lobovitz?
So I just wanted clarification on how the space will be used now, and then I have another question.
Sure. This will be a studio and office for our Boston team members. We work in design and engineering for immersive experiences and other similar installations. And so this will be a space for us to have our our meetings and our work on our designs. Occasionally, we may bring in a client for a meeting to show them proposals or diagrams, etc. But yeah, the proposed use is for an office space.
Thank you. So my follow-up question is, this is, I think you said 3,600 square feet. If you were to leave the space, would then other businesses be able to move in that had a different type of business and require a lot more parking and a lot more activity? Or would that business need permission from this committee?
Yeah, I think it would definitely be assessed on an ad hoc basis. I think they would have to sort of do the same type of diligence that we did to determine whether the zoning supports their type of business. If they are also an office space, I believe the zoning would allow that. And then I think, and definitely, Katie, please correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe that if the parking waiver is approved, that the space, they would not need to apply for a new waiver. And if it were a business that had a substantial number of employees, then I think they could make use of the other nearby municipal parking and street parking and also the public transit. But obviously they would need to assess the needs of their
So
team.
could we get clarification from Katie, please?
Ms.
Yeah,
Wewell.
so sometimes, it all depends on how the order is written. Sometimes for parking waivers, we condition it to this use only, this business only. I think that is up to the discretion of the council. I will say this isn't a village center, but if it's really up to the will of the committee if they want to make it this applicant only or this use only. And I think a similar use would probably be okay to replace them depending on the language of the special permit. But if it fell under a different use category, it could have a higher parking requirement that could trigger a further special permit. Or if one of the personal services vacates and then is replaced by a use with a lesser parking requirement, it could all be a swap. So it really depends on what happens in the future.
Thank you. I would be curious to hear from other counselors on that issue as to whether if the use of the space changed and there was a much bigger demand for parking, even without changing the waiver of the 15, how we should approach this. Thank you.
Is that it for now, Councilor Lobovitz?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to just address a question that came up earlier before we started for everyone's information who doesn't already know. As soon as we ask for input from the public, just by saying, let's hear from the public, any members want to speak, that opens the public hearing. So we don't have to make a separate motion to do that. The public hearing has been opened based on the request to hear from the public. Next down, I have Councilor Leary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I really don't see I don't have any problem with this project. Actually, I think it's 3 to 5 new employees that will frequent our village centers and our restaurants and our coffee shops. And as most of you know, I'm not a big fan of parking minimums, and I don't think that we have a great idea of how much parking people need, especially in a transit-oriented area like that. But I am curious if Hunter or Victor plan on getting to work in anything other than a single occupant vehicle, being that you could bike or take transit to get to that area.
Yes, at least based on where our team members currently live, I'm not sure that biking would be the safest or most feasible. I do plan on using a vehicle, although the other thing that I think is relevant here is we are a hybrid company. And so at this time, none of our team members are commuting into the space 5 days a week. And so I think that's another way that we intend to mitigate the demand for those parking spaces.
Right, so you're doing a hybrid model as well. People aren't in the office all the time. Yeah.
Correct.
And it's really none of my business how you get to work. I was just curious because it is very accessible to the Green Line and buses.
Sure.
as
No,
well.
I appreciate that. And I will just echo that we're very excited to be new tenants in Newton and take advantage of the different elements that you said. So thank you
Yes.
for having us.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Councilor Leary. Councilor Downs.
Thank you, Chair. I'm, as I hear this, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is a use that kind of comes in at different times than the current uses. There are alternate ways for people to get in, alternate places for people to park. I think my feeling is more people in Newton Highlands Village is better. Maybe we could actually keep a diner alive for longer than a few months, and that would be a good thing for the neighborhood. So I would not want to condition the parking waiver on this use only. I would hope that we would have other offices and other uses that could come in here. I also just wanted to make sure that the petitioners were aware that we do have a Newton Highland employee parking program. It is not oversubscribed. It is still possible to buy a transferable annual permit to park on nearby streets. And you just need to go to the planning department. I think it's David Kozis who runs that. That does it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Downs. Councilor Farrell.
Thank you, Chair. Two things. I guess I thought I heard the planning department say that there's significant amount of street parking available. As a person who's in that neighborhood a great deal, Newton Highlands is a pretty vibrant village center, and I can tell you that I frequently search for a parking place over there. But more importantly, I guess I'm curious to know whether in a project like this, as the issue of parking becomes an increasing conversation for the City Council and us, what actions the Planning Department does to meet with the Newton Highlands Village Enhancement Project, which is being proposed by the city. Millions of dollars are going to be spent to reconfigure some of the streets in that area. And I guess I'd just like to know whether they are in fact aware that you're asking us to waive 15 parking places. I'd like to know that there's some coordination between the different interests of the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor.
I think I can answer that. I'm not directly involved in that, but we do have a new Director of Transportation Planning who I think would be the one who is working closely with the Department of Public Works on that.
Do we know whether that person has been informed about this or about issues like this? We get a lot of parking questions here.
We do. I think I don't know if the parking waiver rises to the level. I'm happy to take that back. I think another important thing to consider is if this property had opted in to the Village Center Overlay District, these folks would have just been able to occupy the space right away. Instead, their landlord wasn't comfortable with that, and they decided to go the special permit path instead. But I think this was an area contemplated to have some sort of lesser parking requirement as the city grows.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wewell. Any other comments or questions by, oh, Counselor Gentile.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I wanted to make sure I understood the square footage of what is being petitioned here. I thought I heard that the basement area where Hunter and Victor are petitioning to occupy was, I thought I heard 650 feet, and then I heard something about 3,600 feet. So which is it? What is the correct number?
3,000, yeah,
Yeah.
3,650, 3,650 square feet.
And that's that is the 3,650, and that is the space that for just this petitioner,
Correct.
and that's for 3 people.
3 to 5 team members on a rotating basis, working hybrid.
Okay. Hunter and Victor, or either one, are you occupying the space now?
We do have team members who have begun working in there. We were given guidance from Jane Santasuoso from Katie's department that we could begin preparing the space at this time. And so we've begun kind of receiving packages, trying to set up utilities, other similar activities. So yes, we have had some team members there.
All right. Jane does a lot of good work for the city, but last I knew, she was not able to give folks permission to go into a space before the special permit has been adjudicated. So I'm surprised to hear that. And I'm honestly puzzled by 3 people renting 3,600 square feet, that it's just going to be a minor usage. It seems like maybe there are plans to do a little bit more there. So anyway, that's all I have. I wanted to get the right number. Thanks.
Thank you, Counselor Gentile. Let's go back to Counselor Lobovitz.
So I continue to be, I'm all in favor of this usage, but I continue to be concerned about future usage and the impact on parking. It's not just on Lincoln Street or the immediate adjacent areas on Walnut Street. There are quite a number of residential homes in that area that need parking as well. Floral Street primarily, I would say. And particularly in view of Councilor Farrell's remarks that this area is going to be looked at again and presumably redesigned in some substantial way, I'm reluctant to give approval for further use beyond the petitioner's request without reviewing that situation if new tenants move in with a very different use.
So if we come to voting on this, you would probably make the recommendation that limitation be included in the council order.
As I said before, I would like to hear other councilors' remarks on that issue, but right now that's my inclination, yes.
Okay, let's hear
I
again.
could, I'm sorry, I can,
Go ahead.
just so the council is aware, we do have a pretty boilerplate condition that says any change of use would require an amendment to that special permit. So if these tenants were to, assuming they get approval, if they were to leave and someone else comes in, it would trigger review.
Ms. Wewell, is that use or occupant? Any change of use?
It's typically use that we use. I don't know
Thank you.
if Attorney Temple has any further guidance on further refining that language.
Yeah, I would say as it is currently, if it says use, that means another office tenant may come in under this parking waiver. But if the committee would like to limit it even further, then you would say this tenant rather than this use.
That's what I was thinking, excuse me, Councilor Lobovitz was getting at, because many other office uses would have a more intense need for parking possibly, and/or customers or clients than this particular use seems to have. Councilor Gentile, your hand is up again?
Yeah, I apologize. Just one last question for the petitioners. Does your lease allow you to sublease the space, or are you prohibited from subleasing the space?
I am fairly certain we are prohibited from subleasing the space, nor do we have any intention to sublease the space.
Could you just clarify that before we have to vote on this at the full council? I mean, it's a yes or a no in the lease, and I'd be curious as to if you were allowed or not. You said you think, but if
Yes,
somebody...
it has. I can look that up. Yes, though it is prohibited. We are not allowed to sublease the space.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Gentile. Councilor Laredo.
So the question posed by Councilor Lobovitz is an interesting one, and frankly, one I think we struggle with in this committee from time to time. I'll share my thinking on it for what it's worth. I really don't like the idea of a tenant moving out in a year or 2 years, and then a new tenant having to come back in for approval and go through that process over and over again. That strikes me as difficult for a landlord and frankly costly and not particularly business friendly. The flip side, of course, is I think what I heard from Attorney Temple is that if the use remains, say, office, that's consistent, don't have to come back. If, for example, they were to turn it into a pet grooming facility, for example, that would be a different use and they would have to come back. Is that accurate?
Ms. Wewell?
Is that accurate? Yes, any change in use like to a pet grooming would require them to come back, and their parking calculation would be recalculated to ensure that, if they need a further waiver or not.
Then I guess my view on this is as long as the use remains consistent, I'm not particularly worried about the identity of the tenant, especially when it's an office type use. I might feel differently if it was some other type of facility, but I do think we want to provide the needed flexibility to folks so they're not coming back to us over and over again for, frankly, relief that on this committee we have almost routinely granted over the years with some exceptions. But again, reasonable minds can differ on this one. I would, like I said, I'm comfortable with the use language. Thank you.
Thank you, President Laredo. Councilor Lucas.
Thank you, Chair. To piggyback on what Councilor Laredo said, I would also be comfortable putting in a condition in the council order that says if the use remains the same, the future petitioner doesn't require a special permit. But no, I think I have that backwards. If the use changes, it should require another special permit, and they would have to come before the committee. Question to the petitioner. It's an office space, and I can't remember if you said it or not, but what type of business or industry is it?
Yes, we are a design and engineering firm. We specialize in the immersive experiences and installations. And I can maybe speak to a little bit of the question of why does it seem like maybe a slightly large space for our team members. Part of it was just kind of the availability of different spaces in the area that we needed, in terms of what was convenient for our team members to access. And this space was in a really great location for us. And then we anticipate having, an area for to have food, to have lunch for our team members, more of a conference room. And then and we anticipate storing some materials over time, for examples of different types of wood, perhaps, or foam, just so that maybe when a client comes, we can show them, oh, this is an example of a material that we might use, or something like that, that we would just have some storage for ourselves.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Hunter. All set, Councillor Lucas? Councillor Downs?
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to remind ourselves of some of the issues that we're facing as a community. Among them are heat islands and climate change and increasing water flows, and impervious surfaces such as surround Newton Highlands for private parking are part of the issue. So requiring businesses that don't bring in a lot of extra employees and that are right next to a station to add additional parking or find additional parking may possibly mean paving more of Newton Highlands. Have a look at the satellite view and you'll see a great, huge amount of blacktop around. And outside of the Hartford Street lot and the on-street parking, that's private parking. So your parking issue when you drive into Newton Highlands and are looking to park right near Anna's Taqueria has nothing to do with these guys being able to use 3 or 4 spaces across the street from O'Hara's. I think the one thing that might actually help is if we allowed or asked our landlords to share parking, as I think is generally the practice right now, where after hours, when all of these businesses at this address are closed, O'Hara's customers use that parking at night because it's right close and they're closed. But I don't think we want to get into the nitty gritty of managing private parking when really almost any day you can find parking just to the west of the Hyde Community Center on Lincoln Street, or on Chester or Bowdoin or Standish or Columbus Street that is available. And that's what the Newton Highlands employee parking program does. If you need an extra spot, I think it's $250 a year, transferable. You can park at a designated spot a little bit further from the village center without having to abide by the 2-hour, 1-hour, 15-minute parking limits that we have in those areas. And it's a shared parking model that reduces the amount of pavement that we're then forcing on our village centers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Downs, for reminding everyone of that opportunity, and especially for new businesses who might not be aware that they have the potential for that. Councillor Farrell.
Thank you, Chair. Just a point of clarification. Perhaps Mr. Temple can help me with this. Do these waivers pertain to the owner of the building, of the property, or to the business that are leasing space from the owner?
Mr. Temple?
Special permits generally run with the land as a rule, but these ones in particular are, as Ms. Wewell said before, our standard language is that any change in use will require it to come back. So it really is tied to the use.
So just to help me, does that mean that there was a waiver for the other businesses that are in this property at some point, so that they're down to 15 now and we're being asked to waive another 15? I'm just curious about how that works.
I can speak to that.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, you go, Katie.
So there's the parking lot, right? And there's 15 stalls in that parking lot as it exists today. The 2 personal services uses on the top floor above the basement, they are using those spaces to meet their parking requirement per the zoning. So the zoning sets forth parking requirements for several uses contemplated pretty much. And now that leaves this office use trying to occupy this basement space without any parking stalls to say per zoning, look, we have enough parking to satisfy the zoning code for our use to operate. I think there's a lot of literature out there that kind of points to, you know, zoning parking minimums being a little bit dated and not really reflective of the true demand. But, you know, I don't want to impose that on anyone. That's my opinion. But it does help Councilor Farrell that it's sort of like each use kind of got there first, so they get to take credit with the stalls on site.
So just one last little piece, please. So if the owner is to sell this building, what are the parking, do the parking requirements change again?
Sorry, Counselor, if the use stays the same, then the waivers, this special permit would follow to the new owner as long as the uses are the same.
Okay, so a new owner would also have to have a nail salon and a dog or personal services in those slots, and then something similar to the current use downstairs.
Correct. It's changes in use that will change the calculation, not change in ownership of the building as a whole.
Thank you.
Right, I always try and remember, it's about the use. Let's see, is there anyone else who would like to make a question? Councilor Lobovitz, are we?
I was just going to say, I was going to make a motion if there's no further comment.
Okay, I would look forward to that, and at that time, you might want to close the public hearing. Just before you do that, I'm going to just weigh in a little bit. I think I am aligning myself easily with some of the comments that Councilors Laredo, Lucas, Downs, and Leary made, and as both Katie Wewell and Jonah Temple pointed out to us, a change of use would signal a new special permit, so I feel comfortable also with the standard language that we already have in our council conditions, and not, for me, not needing to add anything more restrictive. That's just how I'll go on it. But now let's...
Now I'm a little confused because I thought that was one option, is to say if there were a change in use, it would have to be reviewed.
That's already standard language. We don't need to, correct me if I'm wrong, Jonah Temple and Katie Wewell, I don't believe we need to state that in addition to that as standard language in our council order that already exists.
It sounds like the order that will be pulled up on the screen will have that language. Is that right, Katie?
I don't think it was, I think it was an oversight that it was not in the Friday packet version, but I'm working on adding it right now to the presentation.
That will be very helpful. We can all look at it up on the big screen and we'll see it in black and white. Thank you. While you're doing that, I believe Councilor Lobovitz is making a motion.
I move to close the public hearing.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Public hearing is closed. We will look at the council order, but depending on the council, would you like to make a motion about that too?
Yes, assuming the language is changed to reflect the change in use, I'd like to move to approve this project.
All right, let's take a look at the findings and the council order.
So for the findings, we state this is an appropriate location because it's in a village center with access to public transit, and the area does have a diverse mix of uses. The requested parking waiver will not adversely affect the neighborhood because it's in a village center with close proximity to transit options and public parking. The requested parking waiver will not create a nuisance or serious hazard, to vehicles or, I think that's missing, but it's in my head, to vehicles or pedestrians, because the existing curb cuts and driveway access are being maintained. That site circulation is not changing. So access to the site over streets is appropriate for the types and numbers of vehicles involved. As parking demand is mitigated by the proximity to transit and by the different peak parking demand for parking between uses on the site. And the parking waiver is in the public interest because constructing 15 additional stalls would require a substantial increase in impervious paving, and the site is within a village center with access to transit. And then the condition, we have plan referencing, standard building permit conditions, standard occupancy, and then any change in use requires an amendment to the special permit.
Does that satisfy you? Yes.
I have a question. I'm sorry, Chair, I have a question.
Yeah, we're just muting whatever that sound was. Go ahead, Councilor Downs.
Yeah, sorry. This is the annoying landline. When we say any change in use requires an amendment to the special permit, we're assuming any change in use that would, under our zoning, require additional parking would require an amendment to the special permit. I assume if you move it to something that doesn't require additional parking, it does not require another special permit. Is that correct?
Mr. Temple?
Yeah, I think that's right. We can certainly tweak that language to reflect that technical reading. I think we would interpret it that way anyway, but yes.
I think that's what we've done in the past, and just doesn't make sense to have them come back for a special permit if they would need normally fewer than the parking spaces that they already have.
Right.
I agree with that.
Right. Thank you. Okay, I think we're ready to vote.
Councillor Block?
Aye.
Councillor Downs?
Aye.
Councillor Farrell?
Aye.
Councillor Kelly?
Aye.
Councillor Leary?
Aye.
Councillor Lobovitz?
Aye.
Councillor Lucas?
Aye.
Councillor Laredo?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Hunter and Victor. We're moving on to the next and final item of the night, which is number 79-24, a request to amend special permit number 395-22 to allow for a cash payment in lieu of providing IZ units at 136-144 Hancock Street in Auburndale. I see the petitioner lining up, but I think we're going to have a quick setting of the stage by planning, just to put it in perspective, and then you'll have your conversation. Yes, no?
If I could just jump in real quickly, we did submit about 20 minutes ago the paperwork to withdraw the request for the payment in lieu. So I'm not sure if that cuts off what the planning department was planning on presenting, but what I would like to do is take this time to discuss the future plans for the project that will come back at a later date and present, or from guidance from the city how to proceed with these potential changes.
Great. I think that cleans things up. I think we will appreciate hearing what you're working on now and have a kind of a discussion conversation. We will let planning give a little background to where we are now and the history of it, and then we look forward to hearing from you. That just means what we will not be talking about tonight is anything to do with the payment in lieu, which neatens things up. Councilor Laredo, President Laredo.
So I want to be a little bit, I'm eager to hear the plans, don't get me wrong, but we have a docket item which is calling for a substitution of payment in lieu for the requirement. That's the only item before us. I am more than a bit concerned that that you're going to be presenting a proposal which has not been identified to the public, which is something brand new that's being presented at least to us, but the public's not going to have an opportunity to follow along with it. And I take it what you're going to be coming back with is either the options of you can proceed by right and don't need any further relief. That may be one option. The second may be seeking some kind of consistency ruling to see if your plan is consistent with what's been approved, or the third would be some entirely new special permit. Are those kind of the options that you're considering right now, Mr. Oliveri?
So I think the plan, or what my thought was for this meeting, knowing that we've taken the payment in lieu off the table at this point, is just to give a high-level overview of the changes, but not necessarily ask for a vote or ask for, and I don't know procedurally how that can happen, but that's what my purpose of, well, first coming here tonight is to say that we've taken the payment in lieu off the table, and then request guidance from the.
Okay, let me interject and try and
Please.
respond to what you're asking. We were not aware until Mr. Oliveri just told us that they were have requested to withdraw the payment in lieu. The clerk hadn't even seen that yet. That is something we would need to vote to approve that. So I'd like to hear from law, particularly in planning, on whether it's appropriate for us to do that tonight. If you have all the paperwork officially for that, we can vote on that. That is the item before us tonight. I do think that the committee, the entire council, and the public would like to hear the direction you're heading as a conversation. There are no plans. Nothing will be voted on aside from to vote on the withdrawal of the payment in lieu. We're not voting on any plans that they're working on, but we are interested in hearing them as they are interested in presenting them and hearing our feedback on how to proceed. Is that?
And that's my concern procedurally, Madam Chair. If we start a back and forth discussion on a plan that's not before us, on an item that is being withdrawn, I think that's actually problematic in the land use context.
You're an attorney and I'm not, but I see it as two different things. There is an item before us which is about the payment in lieu, which we will get direction from the planning and law department staff on whether that's something we should vote on tonight. The other thing is an existing special permit, which may, whatever they're working on may fit fully within that. It may not come back as an amendment or a consistency ruling. It might just be changes that still fit within the special permit that currently stands. So I'm not sure why we wouldn't want to hear about that.
Because we don't have any jurisdiction to hear it. Special permit's been approved, that's my concern. But maybe, Madam Chair, don't get me wrong, I understand the tension here. We all want to hear what this petitioner is proposing as a matter of kind of common sense. I am concerned procedurally about doing that. I'd ask Attorney Temple to give us some guidance. Maybe there's a way that they can give us at least some overview without any back and forth feedback. That might be one way of doing it. I defer to Attorney Temple.
Well, I learned under you as chair here that back and forth is not how we like to do a public hearing. But I wouldn't mind hearing from them and hearing from the council members, the land use members, but I definitely would like to hear from Attorney Temple. Given all of this, what is your advice for us this evening?
So two things. First, I do think at the end of this night, however it looks, there should be a vote to allow the withdrawal without prejudice. So that will end the petition that's before you. I share some of President Laredo's concern as to once that withdrawal happens, there is no petition before you. But I think before you take the vote on that, it would be okay to hear a summary from the petitioner of what they are thinking about moving forward, with the understanding that nothing is really within your jurisdiction to act on at this point. But the public does have notice that this project is being discussed tonight. So I think some limited overview and discussion I'm comfortable with.
Madam Chair, just
Just 1 minute, please. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Temple. I am happy to hear, again, you're a lawyer and Councilor Laredo is, and I'm not, and I appreciate your insight on that, and I hope that we proceed in that way. Councilor Block.
This is really a point of information. It seems to me that after planning and the petitioner make their presentation regarding the item before us, recommending to withdraw, that we can have a discussion about that before we take our vote. And I think that's what Mr. Temple was in effect saying. So
I think so too, and that was my intention, and I don't view that as a back and forth between us and the developer. And I don't view us voting on a plan that we're not seeing, or a plan that may have already been approved and is in action. But as you know, as the ward councilor, there's a lot of interest and curiosity about what's going to be happening at this site, and I do think that hearing about the potential changes will be helpful. Mr. Temple, do you think we should vote on the withdrawal without prejudice before having a conversation, or does it matter?
No, I would wait until the end to do that.
Okay, great. Counselor Farrell. Oh,
I'm sorry, I'm a little confused by all this. Shouldn't we have a formal request to withdraw as part of this process?
we have that. That
We-
was submitted earlier today, and we'll be voting on that at the end of the night.
And we have seen it?
Those of us in this room have not, but those, I think, on Zoom and the petitioner have seen it. So that's why, also part of why we're going to get to it later. That has been submitted in writing according to the petitioner.
Okay, I guess I'm just confused that if everyone's seen it outside of us, then I think that's nice. But why don't we have just a really quick submission that we can look at in the next meeting? Thank you.
Perhaps
Madam
that's
Chair,
what,
they submitted at 7:23 this evening, so it was while the meeting was in session.
What was that?
it was submitted at 7:23 this evening while the meeting was in session, which is why we have not seen it. Ms. Wewell, are you able to put that up on a screen share later when we come to the time of voting on it? So we can look at
Sure.
it? Great. Councillor Gentile. Your hand was up. Unmute, please.
With all due respect, I think that you need to check your agenda, and the only item that has been noticed to the public is for a cash payment in lieu of providing the 2 units. And now we're talking about having a discussion about a totally different plan. And so I think that President Laredo's concern is extremely, it's very legitimate. And I don't see how, I mean, if you want to accept the withdrawal of what was noticed and filed, you know, I don't see where there's any problem doing that. But I think that you have to be very careful about having a discussion, or at least there needs to be, maybe you want to get the presentation and leave it at that, and then notice another public hearing in order to see if the members of the community have input on what's being proposed. This isn't a small change, okay? You're gonna hear, if you decide to hear the petition, you're gonna hear a significant increase in the number of bedroom units. And I've spoken to the petitioner about it. And, you know, actually, I think it's something that may well make sense. So I don't want you to think that I'm bringing this up because I'm opposed to it. I actually want to hear from members of the Land Use Committee what their thoughts are on the change. But I don't see how you can have that kind of a discussion when it hasn't been noticed at all.
Excuse me. May I
Yes, Mr.
make
Oliveri.
one comment? The discussion is about the reasons why we're withdrawing the petition. And we feel it's entirely appropriate to have that conversation leading up to that vote.
Councillor Lucas.
Thank you. I'll be very, very brief because I do want to hear from the petitioner in full and if planning, if they have to say anything. But in response to Councillor Farrell, I am on the NewGov webpage and I do see the letter of withdrawal here. I know you said Ms. Wewell was going to present it on the screen during her presentation, but I can see it right here. Thank you.
Councillor Laredo and then Farrell.
So I think there's a bit of a middle ground here. I think it's appropriate for the petitioner to explain to us now the rationale for why they are requesting seeking the request to withdraw. I don't think, however, we ought to be having any back and forth discussion on that at all, because I am very worried that in doing so, we're intruding on something that's not properly before us. So I think that's the middle ground, Chair Kelly, and allows us to go forward, get some information, but doesn't somehow, I want to be careful, actually, we don't taint the special permit process. And that's as much for the petitioner's benefit as ours. So that's my suggestion. And maybe we can move on then.
I was getting to the same place, President Laredo. I was thinking, as he explained it, to explain why they're withdrawing, why they're seeking to withdraw without prejudice. That explanation is helpful. To remind us all, we're not here to, in the special permit process, to plan or judge or vote on any changes. That will happen with ISD and with the planning department and with the petitioner. We have already approved a special permit for this project. I think we're all clear now. So, Mr. Oliveri, would you like to go ahead, or is it's maybe we don't need to hear from planning the process that led us up to now? Why don't you just explain why you're here tonight seeking to withdraw the suggestion for payment in lieu?
Madam Chair, before you proceed, just one last point.
Yes, Councilor Gentile.
So earlier this year, in a private conversation between you and me, I applauded you for holding the line on dealing with paperwork that came in the day of the meeting. It was a project that Alderman, Council Lipoff was interested in hearing about, and you held the line, and I was pleased to see you do that. Now you have a document that came to you at 7:23 this evening, and anyway, I don't see the difference.
I hear your point. That is actually a good point, and I will take that under consideration before we decide whether we're actually going to vote on that tonight or not, or whether we need more time to let that be noticed that that has been submitted. Thank you, actually, for pointing that out and for your consistency of thinking. Mr. Oliveri.
Thank you. So the reason why we are withdrawing the request for the payment in lieu is because there is strong support to have the affordable units on site. And obviously, we all have been involved in these conversations to try to figure out a solution to the issue of putting these units on site or the payment in lieu. We have brought on a new structural and architectural team that has looked at this building through a different lens and has come back to us with some ways that we can save some considerable costs on construction. That would include reallocating the units between the Barton House and the Walker Center. Right now, we have all of the Barton units set up as townhouses. They would be structured more of flats. And what we would do is change the unit count between the Barton House and the Walker Center. Right now, it's 7 and 5. We would make it 8 in the Barton House, 8 in the Walker Center, and 4 in the Barton House. What this has been able or allowed us to do is save construction costs on the buildings themselves to get us more in line with where we needed to be to provide the units on site. The request that we will be asking for does not include increased FAR. It does not include an increase in unit count, doesn't change parking. The only request that'll be part of our process is going to be an increase in bedroom count by 12 bedrooms in total. We've been able to save on some common space by these structural changes, and that has allowed us to model out this project and incorporate the 2 units on site. The units will be above grade. We feel we understand the IZ requirements and ordinance. I know we've come to you before and put some of these units in the lower level. That's not the case. They're going to be 1 in the Walker Center, 1 in the Barton House, and they will be, we feel, they will fit in with the requirements of the IZ or ordinance. So that is the kind of high-level overview of what we're doing. or what we are planning on presenting or bringing forth to the city.
Thank you, Mr. Oliveri. That sounds very responsive to many of the comments you've heard from the public and from the City Council about preferring the IZ units on the site. Jonah, Mr. Temple, would you like to speak? I was about
Yeah,
to call
Chair,
on
just
you
two
anyway.
things. I do think that should be the limit of the discussion on the new proposal. I did not understand the extent of it and the potential that it could potentially require special permit relief. So I would not recommend going any further than this. I think that explanation is completely appropriate because it is the basis for the request withdrawal. And I also, Chair, would suggest that you still take public comment on the original petition to amend, because we are in the middle
Yes.
of a public hearing. So to the extent anyone is here to speak to that original petition, they should still be allowed to.
That's exactly what I was going to do next, and to remind everyone that we are sticking to that topic, which was the in lieu of payments from the public and also on committee. Mr. Temple, while you're there and while we're doing this, I would like us to think about whether it would be more appropriate, given how late this request to withdraw was filed, whether we should vote on that tonight or whether we should wait and let that be more noticed and let members of the public know that that had been submitted. And maybe we will not be voting on that tonight. I'm of two minds on that. I do want to ask if there's anyone from the public. I had heard ahead that there were some people who might want to speak, so I will remind you again, we're in a webinar format, and raise your hand at the bottom of your screen. And please keep your comments limited strictly to the payment in lieu aspects of this. A real person. Welcome.
Good evening, David Hedison, 215 Waverly. I would just like to say I'm very excited to hear that the affordable units will be on site, and that made my evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hedison. I don't see anyone on Zoom. I had been told there were a few people, perhaps from some organizations, but I think given the possible changes, people don't feel the need to talk tonight. Are there any questions or comments that are appropriate, particularly to the in lieu of payment by members of the committee? Councilor Lobovitz?
I just want to applaud that decision and completely supportive of it. I do want to comment on the question of the vote or question. If at all possible, you know, I would like to be able to vote on the petition tonight, on the request tonight. I think it's in the public interest to move this forward as expeditiously as possible, thoughtfully but expeditiously. And so if we could all see to that, unless delaying the vote wouldn't delay the process, in which case, you know, I have no problem in delaying the vote. But if it would delay the process in any way, I would prefer to move forward with the vote. Thank you.
Mr. Oliveri, would you like to respond to that comment?
I would like to request my counsel, Terry Morris, be allowed in for a second if he's in that space.
His hand up? I was looking for a hand to be raised and didn't see it, but he's coming in now.
Thank you. He was. I was kind of getting text messages.
Mr. Morris.
I don't know if you can hear me, Madam Chair. One reason I was reluctant to speak was because I've been some difficulty in hearing me speak. So if that continues, I apologize. But I want to explain why the decision was, or the letter was filed. I had personally received communications from various sources, planning for one and others as well, that this was the direction that the people wanted to see, and there was some concern that the decision to withdraw the petition for payment in lieu if it were withdrawn, would focus the discussion, any further discussion, on a course of action that most people wanted to see happen. And if there was any question, if Mr. Olivieri could have basically made that statement as he has without our having done the letter, this discussion wouldn't have changed any at all, but at least you now have some firm evidence that that's the course that Mr. Olivieri, my client, has taken in this matter.
Do you want to address the question that Councilor Lobovitz raised about whether holding off on voting on that tonight would delay the process? Would it hold it up? Does it have an effect on moving forward?
I think there's no reason why the committee can't do something that they've often done in the past, and that is take a vote subject to second call. And if it's appropriate for the full council to act at that time, they can do so. If they determine that it's not as a result of any information that comes in the meantime, then they can not act at that time. But why take that option out of your hands?
Okay, thank you. We have several councilors who want to speak. Councilor Lobovitz? No, all set. I forgot to cross you off. Councilor Farrell?
Thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, let me compliment Mr. Olivieri and his group. I think the decision is terrific and I hope for him, but certainly for the community. I would like to suggest, however, that we hold off until we have a formal, an appropriately timed declaration from them that this is their decision. I don't think, in terms of public process, that submitting a document, even one that's as good as this and appreciated, should come in at 7:30 at night. When I think the process generally requires a 48 hours or some sort of submission. I think this whole thing can be done quickly. I don't see how we're going to interrupt their planning if it waits another 2 weeks. I would just like to see the formal process continue as it should. Thank you.
Mr. Morris, are you trying to raise your hand to respond to that?
Yes, well, Madam Chair, I think Councilor Farrell has, if he wants the 48 hours notice, that's one of the reasons why you use second call as a procedural procedure, so that there is a lapse of time between your action tonight, if you were to do so, and it's having been brought up at the next council meeting, which is certainly more than 48 hours away. The other thing I just wanted to comment on, there's been no determination that this course of action requires an amendment. Others tonight have commented on the possibility that this may be resolved through a consistency ruling, but that course of action has not been decided upon. Consistency rulings are something that, if the commissioner believes that he is not fully comfortable with making a decision on consistencies, you know that as a matter of procedure, he has kicked those decisions to the Land Use Committee. Land Use Committee has often taken up consistency requests without the necessity of a public hearing.
Correct. Yes, we are aware. Thank you, though. Councilor Lucas.
Thank you, Chair. So based upon what the petitioner said in his opening remarks about how he's going to potentially change the site, I do have a list of questions. However, based upon what Mr. Temple said and what you said, our comments and questions should be only related to the payments in lieu of providing the 2 affordable units, right?
That was the advice that Mr. Temple gave us.
So I shouldn't ask questions about the structure, what he said?
Not tonight, I don't believe.
Excuse me, I can clarify.
I was also going to
Maybe not a question, but I
don't
can.
think I ever heard that they were changing anything about the site, but go ahead, Mr. Olivieri. Then you?
Yep.
I have you down next.
Madam Chair, I really think we're starting to head into waters that we should not enter. And I think, with all respect to my colleague from Ward 2, none of those questions should be asked this evening. The only issue for us right now is whether we vote this evening or not on the petition to withdraw I have my views on that, but I want to wait till others speak ahead of me.
Well, I
Thank you.
have you on the list.
Yeah, so I guess by that, since I can't ask questions about the site and anything like that, it's only about the payments in lieu of the housing, the affordable units. I will vote if there is a motion to withdraw without prejudice, subject to second call potentially. I will vote in the affirmative. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Lucas. Councilor Leary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to vote on this this evening. I'm very, very happy that the petitioner is going to be keeping the affordable housing on site. I very much appreciate the effort you're doing here, and I don't want to do anything to slow the project down any more than it already has been. So can we just vote on it tonight, and then we'll have a nice new project that we can vote on at another date?
Excuse me, Madam Chair, I just want to make one clarifying statement. One of the reasons why we are requesting the payment in lieu to be removed or withdrawn is because we are able to construct 16 units within the existing footprint and approved plan without changing the site to stay consistent with the special permit.
I don't want to speak for everybody. I think that we understand that that's the rationale for the motion, for the petition to withdraw that you brought. So thank you. Councilor Laredo.
So I think we've entertained motions to withdraw regularly, both in this committee and at the full council even. I think the way to alleviate the fact that we don't have a formal document in front of us is to do it subject to second call. That does provide appropriate opportunity for us to look at it's just like if we got a late filed plan and we wanted an opportunity to review the plan before we finally voted for it in full council. So it's Councilor Block's ward, so maybe he wants to move to approve withdrawal subject to second call.
I have a hand up before I do that. Councilor Lobovitz, you did have a hand up again.
So I don't think my question was actually answered about whether there would be a significant delay in moving the project forward if we held this until proper notice. Could somebody respond to that?
Yes, Mr.
I haven't been
Oliveri,
satisfied with any of the
Mr. Oliveri or Mr. Morris?
answers.
I don't believe so.
There is a per diem, there's a per diem cost to carry this property with its future very much up in the air. So I would say, yes, there is a significant adverse result for not acting tonight. It just postpones ultimately the course of action that most everyone wants to see. And since the issue is the viability, economic viability of the project, I would think one would be sensitive to the notion that let's make the decision sooner rather than later, or as soon as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Councilor Gentile has his hand up, and then I'm going to let Councilor Block close this out, but I would like to just confirm with both President Laredo and Jonah Temple that you would be comfortable with us voting on this tonight, and I wouldn't mind showing it on the screen so people can look at the wording of what was submitted today, as long as it's second call and there is adequate time for other councilors and the public to become aware of it. Councilor Laredo, are you comfortable with that?
I'd actually be probably comfortable with just a verbal statement in a public hearing from the petitioner. So I certainly think this is fine, and subject to second call, it seems to me, is the appropriate safeguard you need here.
I think so too.
But I'll defer to Attorney Temple.
Mr. Temple?
No, I agree with that completely. It's not really a legal question. It's, under your rules or process, you want to hold them to that. But I don't think that's how this committee is normally operated with a request withdraw.
Well, we've rarely gotten one that was submitted during the course of the meeting. And I think that's one thing that's a little different for us tonight, though I'm happy it was submitted. Councilor Gentile.
So I told the petitioner earlier today that I believe that he was heading in the right direction, and I thought that this would be very well received by my colleagues based on comments that have been made at 2 previous land use meetings. And you have verified that. Anyone that has spoken on the substance of the changes seems to be, very much in favor of it. In my discussion with Mr. Oliveri, he said that he just wanted to get a reading from the Land Use Committee tonight because he has a significant amount of work to still do in order to put plans in front of the committee so that you can have the discussion that you would normally have on the changes. Increasing the bedroom count from 38 beds to 50 is not insignificant. All right, that's not something that I would think that any commissioner would want to rule on themselves for a consistency ruling. We're not talking about a few inches on a lot line or something else that is de minimis. So I would think it's going to come back to you, and the petitioner needs time and was expecting to do that at a subsequent meeting. And the sooner the better. I agree with everybody. My main purpose is tonight is to just try and make sure that members of my ward have an opportunity to weigh in on the changes somehow. So I would ask that you keep the public hearing open and that you find a way to notice people that, this is going to be coming up in land use, if that's in fact what the petitioner just wants to do after they've had a chance to do more of the, plans and schematics and, and do all of the things that they need to do, because this is relatively new news for them also. So again, please, whatever you decide to do, voting at the next meeting to accept this is the safe thing to do, because no one can claim that we violated our rules by voting on this. And it's not going to hold anything up. They have to come back anyway with revised plans for you to review. And that's what I'm going to be interested in, because I want to hear what others think about, this particular change. And everything else is insignificant, as the petitioner pointed out, and they're actually removing some square footage. So everything else is good. It's the bedroom count that's going to be the focus of the discussion. So please find a way to notice the neighbors and the general public that there's a plan, and keep the public hearing open so folks will at least know about it and can weigh in.
Councilor Gentile, and then I will go to President Laredo. The public hearing is only open on this specific item, which is about a cash payment in lieu of providing the IZ units. The public hearing is not open on bedrooms or FAR, and it may not come back to us. I think it is premature for us to determine whether we think it is going to come back to us via a consistency ruling or amendment. That is going to be determined by ISD, probably with some planning input as well. That is not before us tonight. But I think we all agree with you that we want residents and other councilors to be able to be fully aware of what's going on. And there will be time for people to spread the word on things like that. Councilor Laredo. Excuse me, Councilor Gentile. I've called on Councilor Laredo right now. Your time is up for this second.
So, Councilor Gentile, I agree with the chair here, and here's why. You're 100% right that the public should have plenty of opportunity to weigh in for whatever changes are being proposed. And I agree with you, they on the surface seem significant, but that would be part of one of two things: either a consistency ruling, that's not my call, that's the commissioner's call. And in a consistency ruling, as you know, we would be here giving the commissioner advice, or probably more likely, a brand-new petition to amend the special permit, which would go through the typical notice requirement, public hearing requirement, so there'd be ample opportunity in that instance for the public to be heard. But I don't think, this particular petition, which is a payment in lieu of 2 units, is not the right forum to have that discussion. And again, I actually think it might taint the process, and I'd be extremely careful. I would avoid that. So your concerns, in my view, are very well stated, and we will achieve that if this comes back to us via some special permit request, because that depends on whether the petitioner ultimately wants to go forward with anything. I'm hearing that they do, but that's, their call. So that's a long-winded way of saying I agree with you, Chair Kelly.
Thank you. President Laredo, I agree with you too. Councillor Lucas, did you have your hand up again or not? Okay, Councillor Block, would you like a word?
If I'm understanding the sense of this body and the advice of our legal department, I'd move to close the public hearing, and I will follow that with another motion to accept the withdrawal of the petition.
That's how.
Subject to second call. Without prejudice. Thank you.
He hadn't made that full motion yet.
You
but that
haven't
was
given
all
me,
coming.
I haven't given me my law degree yet.
He was just trying to close the public hearing first and then make that motion. But now we have both on the floor. Councillor Block has moved to close the public hearing on the payment in lieu. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
That's, I could tell, I could hear every voice. That's unanimous. We also have a motion on the floor to approve the request to withdraw without prejudice with the terms that Councillor Block just said. Do you need those repeated? Okay, great. Let's vote.
Councillor Block?
Aye.
Councillor Downs?
Aye.
Councillor Farrell?
Aye.
Councillor Kelly?
Aye.
Councillor Leary?
Aye.
Councillor Lobovitz?
Aye.
Councillor Lucas?
Aye.
Councillor Laredo?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Subject to second call. Thank you. Full speed ahead. Thank you, everybody. We're adjourned.